Hello and welcome back to your nutrition course. This is Emily O'Sullivan and I am wanting to navigate as if I'm you on your canvas to show you first of all how to get to the current diet and wellness assignment and then kind of what we're looking for in terms of high quality answers. So some helpful hints for you to follow. So I'm going to access the assignment in various ways. I can either click on assignments and go into the assignment tab, or I can go into the diet analysis section within the homepage, which is where I'm going to access the Chapter 5 Diet and Wellness Analyse Your Lipid Intake assignment. And as you know, it will ask us to load it in a new window, and with my personal MindTap access, the content will load. I've also got open in the background another tab with MindTap, where I've already opened up the Diet and Wellness application. As you know, it's here, the Diet and Wellness plus the green apple. So in order to open two tabs at once, you can just follow any link really from the homepage that takes you to a MindTap based content. So for me, I always choose this top link here, Access MindTap course. Clicking here, I'm not going to do it again because that'll open a third window, but I did this before I went to make this video, and this is open here, and I've opened Diet and Wellness Plus, and this is the homepage of that application. Alright, so this is what it's going to look like when you open up your assignment. You have one attempt. You can save and close out if you don't want to do it all in one go, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. So let's look at the questions. So as you should be familiar by now, there's always a bit of a blurb at the beginning of the assignment, which I'll just highlight here. So it's saying that the purpose of this exercise is to help you identify fatty foods in the diet, as well as sources of saturated and trans fats that we've all now covered in our studying. So the Diet and Wellness programme will help you identify which foods contain which fats, so which type of fat, and it's going to try and steer us to choosing unsaturated fats. That's kind of the purpose of this learning exercise. So if you haven't already, you need to go and track your diet and track your food intake, logging it in the Diet and Wellness programme for 3 days so that you have a food diary from which to do various different analyses. And it says here, consult with your instructor about how to submit reports for this assignment. You don't need to turn in the actual reports. All you need to turn in is what you're typing in these text boxes, and finally you would submit here for grading. You can print out reports if you want to, if you've got access to a printer at home, but it actually isn't necessary, and I'm going to show you how, by having both tabs open at once, you can actually do things kind of live. So this is question 1. So from the Diet and Wellness homepage, select reports and then select macronutrient ranges reports. Enter the first day you recorded your intake into the start box and the last day. So it's asking us to access a report. So as I've gone from the homepage here to the last tab, which is labelled reports, just ignore that 0 there, it won't go away, but you don't need to be concerned. Just reminding myself of the question. Macronutrient ranges report is the report they're asking us for the full range of the recorded period. So I'm going to navigate in our diet and activity reports. We've got other reports down here that we don't need to be concerned with. So macronutrient ranges, and then just checking, this is when I did my inputting, so you need to manually click on the calendar icon here, and then you can navigate forward or back various months, so that you select the first day in this box here, and the end date will be obviously the end date of the recorded period, and making sure that all these boxes are checked so that all food logged at different intervals throughout the day is included within this analysis. Alright, so this is now what we're looking at, the macronutrient ranges report that it's requested we look at. So the question, did your intake for fats fall within the recommended range of 20 to 35% of total energy intake? Okay, so I'm actually not going to concern myself initially at this graph here. I'm purely going to focus on the numbers. Okay, so what I'm going to be concerned with is my actual intake on the right. Oh, sorry, that's going to highlight everything. So to determine what percentage range your macronutrients were distributed in relative to your actual intake will give you the data that you need. So my actual average intake over 3 days, believe it or not, was 2041.44 calories on average per day. Looking at fats, the calories from fat I consumed were 774.944, so I'd round that up to say 775 calories from fat, which equated to a percentage fat intake of 37.961. So I'm going to round that up to 38%, or I could probably quote 37.96 if I want to be extremely specific, but 38% will be more than appropriate based on my total actual intake here. So let's go back to the question. So did your intake from fats fall within the recommended range of 20 to 35%? First of all, I would say no. My actual percentage calorie intake from fat was calculated as 38%, which is greater than the recommendation of 20 to 35% calories from fat. Or I could maybe put AMDR there. And then lastly, an average of 775 calories from fat per day. I could put work consumed or across the period on an average of 775 calories from fat per day were consumed. Yeah, so that would be 100% for that answer there, because I've answered every aspect of the question. So moving on, number 2. So again, this text just follows across, so we've already read and interpreted that, so focusing on the question. So no amount of dietary saturated or trans fat is required for health. Select the Reports tab and select the Fat Breakdown Report for the first to the end day, so the same recorded period, selecting all meals. Your report will show a breakdown of your fat intake for that day as a percentage of total calories. So it's asking us what are the percentages for saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated and trans fatty acids during your recorded period. So we want reports and then fat breakdown reports. So we're going to go back to reports. Here it is, fat breakdown. And it's already got the correct recorded period and all of the meals are ticked. So I'm just going to scroll down. So this is the first time I've looked at this report, so let's read it together. So this report shows how much of each fat you've consumed as a percentage of your total caloric intake. Fat calculations are reported differently by different food producers. Trans fats may not be included in the triglycerides, but may be included in other fats. So it's just saying there may be some errors based on the foods that are in the kind of the contents of this program. Some foods do not report all the fats they contain, such as glycerol, phospholipids and other related compounds. They may be included in other or unspecified fats, so they maybe aren't labelled appropriately, and that might have an effect on this information. Okay, so what are the percentages? So percentage calorie intake on average throughout the 3-day period for each type of fat. So my answer, the first section is saturated fat, so I can read across here that percentage calorie intake from saturated fat, 12.122%, so I'm just writing that down. For monounsaturated fat, it was just over 11%. Poly, 6.627, and trans fat, 0.218. And then obviously unspecified accounts for the remainder of my total of 38%. So all of these numbers should add up to the 38%, which is my total calorie intake from fat. So in the answer, really, I'm going to very simply state those numbers. So I can do that, not necessarily in full sentences, I don't really mind. So the percentage calorie intake for saturated fat. This is perfectly good enough, and I'm going to round down to the nearest whole number, was 12%, and so on for mono unsaturated fat. For me that was 11.2, so I'm going to round it down to 11%. Percentage I'm going to round that up because that was 6.627, so I'm going to round that up to 7%. It's up to you if you want to do one decimal place. If you want whole numbers, I don't mind, whatever you would rather. In fact, I'm going to insist that we all do decimal places, and I've just realised why. So let's start again. So I'm going to use one decimal place at least, or three significant figures, whichever is the least. So 12.1% for this figure here, 11.2%. So these are all three significant figures. Polyunsaturated was 6.627, so I'm going to 6.63%. Trans fat 0.22%. And I'll probably just write a note, in addition, a remaining 7.93% of total calorie intake was from unspecified fats, as you can see here. So just to recap on the presentation of these numbers, so as you can see 12.1 is one decimal place, but there are three numbers there, so that's what I mean by three significant figures. Again, 11.2, there are three numbers. This is a single digit number, so we need to have two decimal places for it to be three significant figures, and here three significant figures. Okay. Moving on, question 3. Which foods provide the most fat to your diet? So it's asking us to use our source analysis report, looking at each type of lipid: saturated, mono, poly, and trans. It says here, what 3 foods contributed the most saturated, mono, poly, and trans? So this, unfortunately, is asking quite a lot for one of these questions. So for each fat, each type of fat, we need to give 3 food examples that contributed the most of that particular type of fat. Okay, so I'll just demonstrate this for you. So let's go back to reports. Source analysis, which is a report we've used before. Yep, my dates are correct. I've got all of my meals selected. So first of all, we'll go to saturated fat here. Okay, so as you remember, this lists all of the foods within the whole food diary period, the whole recorded food period. And at the bottom, there's a key to what these stars mean. So the stars are telling us that these particular foods in these specified serving sizes consumed provide, if it's gold, at least 20% of the daily value for this nutrient, and if silver, at least 10 to 20% of the daily value. So it doesn't refer to your individual DRI, it's referring to the daily value. Remember, daily values are those the type of recommended nutrient intakes that we find on food labels, and generally speaking refer to a 2,000 calorie diet. So a bit more generic than our more individualised things like recommended daily amounts, for example. Okay, recommended dietary amount, sorry.